Evan, didn't you like that?
What's that?
Didn't you like Not Your Father's Root Beer?
I've had it before. It's good.
Is that actually
See,
the
I
name
knew
of
it.
it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
Jesus. I thought you were saying that was like their marketing tagline or something.
No,
Not your
that's what they
father's
call it.
fucking root beer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why would anybody, A, name something not your father's root beer, and B, consume it?
You can ask Evan.
Oh,
What? It's root beer. I had to try it. I love root beer.
I love root beer too, but I'm a Virgil's man. Once I found Virgil's, I'm never going back. Like, I'm just not.
Virgil's? What is that?
It is only the most amazing root beer ever. And if you quibble, you will be smote. So,
Oh, I'll quibble.
you better watch
I've
out for
always
them
been-
thunderbolts, lad.
I'm dodging lightning as we speak.
Lightning, very, very frightening.
Galileo. Yeah. I got Virgileo.
Galileo root beer.
Root beer. I'm just a root beer. Nobody loves me. He's not your father's root beer family. Okay.
From his monstrosity.
Easy come, easy go. Will you overflow? Because you know you do the pop top. Root beer. Trick me down. Couldn't get that high.
Somewhere in the middle of Arizona, you painted a desert and called it my
Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
My name is Megan Kearns. I'm editor of Bitchflix. I am a contributor to Edge Media, which is a new outlet for me. Yay. And I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
And I'm Dave Riedel. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I occasionally write for Salt Lake City Weekly.
Yeah, you do.
I do.
Megan, that's awesome to hear about the new outlet. Looking forward to reading some reviews from there.
Thank you.
Why don't they call them inlets? Just kidding.
All right, I can see what kind of show it's going to be.
Yeah.
So, on this week's show, we have 3 films for you. We are going to be talking about Premature. We're going to be talking about The Surrogate. And we are going to be talking about The King of Staten Island.
I'm not sure I would call him a king. He's more like a viceroy. But,
Yes.
We'll get to that.
First, let's talk about Premature, which is a film that's available right now on Hulu. And I think it was released earlier this year, Megan?
Yes.
What's that?
Yeah, it came out, I think, in February.
Yeah, that's
In
right.
limited release, and then came out somewhat recently on Hulu.
Mm-hmm. So the film is directed by Rashad Ernesto Green, also co-written by him and Zora Howard. It's a coming-of-age film. It centers on Ayanna, who's played by Zora Howard. So it's her summer basically before she leaves to go to college, and she's planning to go to Bucknell. She lives in Harlem, and she meets Isaiah, and they fall in love and have a tumultuous summer romance. So it's one part romance, another part just kind of coming of age, and also just like all of the trials and tribulations that come with young adulthood.
Yeah. And he's a little bit older than she is, too. We should mention that. So,
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, he's just moved to New York City. So he's from the South. I forget where he said exactly. Raleigh. I want to say, so I will.
I love how this is very entrenched in New York. Like I love films that are set in New York and explore the city and really use it to its full advantage. And I felt like this film really did that, with walking through the streets and the parks and the street food that they eat, and, sitting by the river and going through the street parade that happens. And I just love it. I love the energy of New York, and I love that this film captured that.
yeah. And another thing about this, and I think this is a function of having a low budget, is I don't think that films that have low budgets necessarily feel more real, but you can, like the two apartments that you spend a lot of time in, Isaiah's apartment and then Ayana's mother's place, those feel like New York. Like I've been in both those apartments, you know?
Yes.
Like he's got a tiny studio. Like the first time you see it, they're sitting at his desk and then you realize, oh, the bed's right next to it. Oh, the kitchen's right there too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a New York studio.
No friends apartment bullshit here.
No, exactly. And also just how they're outside all the time. And that's true. You're outside all the time, especially in the warmer weather in New York. It's just like, because it's all concrete all the time. You want to be outside just because you're like, all right, I got to offset the concrete with going over to Central Park today. I'm not sure. So I just feel like this movie's really lived in. And it was also shot on 16 millimeter and looks like it in a good way. Yeah. So it was very cool. I was like, this movie's darker than most movies that come out now. I was like, is this shot on film? And indeed it was. So.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. I mean, one of my absolute favorite scenes is just, the cinematography is just exquisite when they're sitting at the river and their backs are to the camera and they're silhouetted under the tree and it's like the sun is setting and everything's like these beautiful shades of like lavender and lilac and deeper purples and it just was gorgeous. I loved the cinematography in this so much.
Yeah. And I also appreciated every time they're on the subway, you know for sure that they were stealing those shots because a movie this small doesn't get permits from the mayor's office to shoot on the subway.
Exactly. I was thinking that too as I was watching the movie. These definitely are kind of run and gun style.
I know. There's one shot like when Ayana and her friends are getting off the subway and it's kind of like obscured. And I was like, oh, I love this shot. And then I was like, oh no, they probably had to do that. But it worked. It worked visually as well as practicality wise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, in addition to the look of the film and feeling lived in and feeling very authentic, I absolutely loved this film so much. I loved Ayana. I loved her character. I loved how she is very guarded and cautious at first when she meets Isaiah, even though she's, clearly very into him. I love that she's so poetic and that she's a writer. I love her writing. The narration of it, you guys know I don't always love narration, but I kind of give it a pass when it's a writer. And this felt very similar in a much better way. It kind of reminded me of Poetic Justice a little, the Janet Jackson film. But again, and I much more enjoyed this. But because I was not a fan of that movie, but that's a whole other thing, whole other topic. But I also really liked Isaiah too. Like I loved how he's really into music and he's so curious about the world, curious about her. And I love their rapport and their interactions. And Dave, I know you were speaking on the Patreon segment when we were talking about Cane River and you're talking about how they go deep really quickly. And I felt that here too. Like they don't really screw around with small talk. Like they get in really deep about art and about their aspirations and goals and their lives. And I really loved that. And I loved their banter. I also really loved that he talked about Star Wars and he could relate to Luke because he's like a regular dude, but really has this like, great destiny and knows there's something greater out there. And I'm like, I love you.
Yes. But I will quibble with that argument.
Yes.
I will quibble with the argument that makes the old ones the only good movies because Rey is in the same position of being someone who isn't every person. So
I agree.
I will quibble with his argument.
Well, except that Rey, because J.J. Abrams is a dick, turned her into not an every person in Rise of Skywalker. She's got some fucking eugenics bloodline bullshit going on.
Yeah.
I'm pretending that doesn't exist.
Yeah, me too.
I'm retconning it. It doesn't exist.
This might be a time where Dave is okay with the retcon.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know how you feel about retcons, Dave.
I'm not sure that Colin Trevorrow, or whatever his last name is pronounced, was the right choice and then to drop out. But it certainly shouldn't have been J.J. Abrams who went back to the helm. But you know that they were like, The Last Jedi pissed off too many defend. Yeah, fuck these people. Anyway, Premature.
I liked that their relationship kind of got into it very quickly, and you could tell was very guarded on a lot of levels. Even in that scene where they're intimate for the first time, and you could tell that she's been through some shit, and she's not, although she's into him, she's, you know, cautiously proceeding, and he does things to make her feel more comfortable opening up, which makes it sad that he turns out to be like a dick.
Yeah. Well, there's that. But wait,
it's so disappointing because he seems like he's going to be a different kind of guy.
Well, yeah, he is until he's not, as unfortunately a lot of people are. But I want to talk about that first sex scene for a minute. That
and
sex
how
scene,
explicit it is. Wow.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
all sex scenes in this movie are very explicit.
Yeah, they're all very explicit. Yeah, that's not what I was going to say. I wasn't going to talk about how explicit it was. I was going to talk about I am obsessed with the fact that it is very much focused on the female gaze, very focused on female pleasure. The camera stays, for the most part, on her face, her excitement, her arousal. And I love that. And throughout all of the sex scenes, actually, the focus is mostly on her and her face and him going down on her, giving her pleasure. And I love that. That is fucking fantastic. And I'm here for it. And we need more sex scenes like that if we're going to have sex scenes in film.
Sure,
I'd agree.
I'll sign on to that.
Love it.
I think there's a practical reason. It's like he is definitely not the main character. He's
no.
Right. I mean, it's her move. It's her story. It's her movie. At the same time, I almost feel like, in a way, I don't want to say that he's incidental because he's not incidental, but he is very much just a supporting character in her story. Like her story is going to be larger than him, even at that last shot when they're sitting next to each other at 125th Street, you know, where she's waiting for the for Metro North.
Yeah.
And I was it's kind of funny when his ex-girlfriend showed up unannounced at his apartment. He and Ayana hadn't been going out very long. I was like, and the ex-girlfriend shows up. I was like, this guy's probably douchey. And then he was.
Yeah.
So because, you know, the ex-girlfriend doesn't show up at your apartment. Well, there's two reasons. One, we don't need to get into. The second reason is, you know, you're an asshole. That's the other reason. So,
well, I was going to say yes, the reason, I'm assuming the reason you're not getting into it, but I was going to say also it could have been she was pregnant. That's always a possibility.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
I was thinking that.
Which is actually what I thought initially. I'm like, oh, she's pregnant because why else would she be here? But yeah, or it could be that he was douchey,
but she never shows up again, right?
Not that we see. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, or he's an asshole, which he clearly is.
But quietly.
Very quietly.
He's quietly an asshole.
Which I appreciate because so often in film, you see, you know, these bombastic male characters who are very clearly assholes and very clearly misogynists. It's very rare for a film to portray a quiet asshole and someone who's quietly sexist or, you know, controlling. And I mean, and there are hints throughout. That's what's so sneaky and brilliant about this film. Like the fact that she leaves her journal after he tickles her and she goes to the bathroom, which she's clearly said, do not read my journal. And she comes back and he's reading her fucking journal. And I'm like, this guy's an asshole who just violated all her emotional boundaries. Fuck this guy.
And then he won't give it back to her.
No, he won't, which is so fucking controlling and upsetting. Oh my God. Yeah, it was so upsetting. So I'm like, okay, he's an asshole because of this. He's an asshole because of that. And then what do you know? Boom. As soon as she has an abortion, he's an asshole. And he's like, oh, it's our choice. And she's like, no, my choice, my body. And yeah, he's such a fucking asshole and kicks her out and then won't speak to her. Like, go fuck yourself, dude. You're a jerk.
Yeah, and he's shitty in a way that a lot of guys are, where they're just, you know, they're emotionally closed off.
Authentically shitty.
And when someone asks them to open up and to make a commitment, that's when they go, oh, well, this is too much.
Ooh.
You know, he's like, I think we should chill. You know, it's like, oh, please.
Which is so...
Fucking get over yourself.
Right? Fucking grow up. Don't be a loser.
Yeah.
I mean... What's the worst thing that's gonna happen? Is like this woman's gonna want to hang out with you? Poor you.
I know, this talented, amazing woman. What a shame. You know,
seriously,
he's also an asshole in another way too. I forgot about this scene for a moment, but it's actually one of my favorite scenes when Ayana's sitting with her friends in the restaurant and he comes in and he's talking about a black man who was shot and he's like, you don't get it because, you know, you're not a black man. And her friend Shantae, who is amazing, I love her.
Awesome.
I'm like,
She was the best.
I was like, Ayanna, you need to hang out with more with her. She's amazing. And she's like, you don't think we get it too? Black women are killed too. Black women have to deal with, black men dying. And it was just so great. She was fucking putting him in his place and, with sexism, and it was amazing. And then I love earlier when they're at the nail salon and she's talking about, oh, we do all this, and men don't even care because they want this like private piece of you because they're territorial. And I was like, yes. I was like, oh my God. And she also called him out for calling women females. I was like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because that is such an annoying thing when dudes call women females. It's like, no, stop.
Well, it's like, doesn't Shantae say, or one of the friends says, like, you don't call them males, you call them men.
I think it's T. Yeah, one of the other friends. Yeah, she says, if you're a suspect, you're a black male, but we call you black men. Yeah, so it was great. I loved that. I absolutely loved that. And he was so pissy about it because they called him out on his bullshit, and then he runs away. And then when Ayanna goes after him, and he's all like, oh, your friends are so young. Like, no, dude, you're fucking immature and being an ass. Like, just stop. You're just pissed off that they didn't kowtow to you and bow down and kiss your feet.
For sure.
Yeah, but I love that. I love that he's so sneaky in his jerkness because it feels so much more authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Authentically shitty.
Yes, you did. You did, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say there are a couple things that I wanted to point out. One, I thought it was kind of funny that we watched 2 films this week where we have a black woman taking a pregnancy test and the person taking the test having completely polar opposite reaction to the test. In this film, it's a horrifying thing. In The Surrogate, which we'll talk about, it's initially something that's a happy news, but also the abortion, which Megan, you mentioned, a very stark contrast to even St. Francis, which we talked about earlier this year, where the main character takes pills and has an abortion, and just the striking difference in the experience of it in this one. It's horrifying pain and suffering and trauma. Versus St. Francis, where it's treated a little bit lighter. So it's, for me, I thought it was an interesting contrast between the two experiences and seeing how 2 different people, different races, different backgrounds experience this and how it affects them so drastically.
Yeah, and that's a really great point that you brought up. And I am curious about the choice to have her experience so much traumatic pain, because that's not not that people who have abortions can't experience that kind of pain or that kind of those kinds of complications, but it's not the norm. The norm is what you see in St. Francis. The norm is what you see in Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, where it's just a thing that happens and it's uncomfortable for a little bit and then it's fine. So it is an interesting choice, and I am kind of curious why they chose to go that route.
Would you like to know my opinion?
Sure.
I mean, I don't have to tell you, like, if you don't want to know it. But
no, I don't want to know it. No,
took it to be. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway.
Get out of here with your male opinion.
Sneakily, in essence. No, I don't think this is a male opinion. I think
you
this
are
is,
a dude. I'm just saying.
I mean, it is. I am a man, and it is my opinion. But I think it represented more of the trauma of the situation than necessarily it did. Like it was a representation rather than this incident. I could be totally wrong. It's the same way that people say, The Fly, the David Cronenberg, The Fly is about, AIDS, and David Cronenberg is like, what? No, it's not. You're like, well, you could see it that way.
Yeah, it can be interpreted that way. I think that's a great point. I think my only reservation not in your interpretation, because I actually like your interpretation a lot, Dave, and I think you're spot on. My only reservation is that I love that abortion is depicted on screen. You guys know that. I've said that before on the show. I say it quite frequently because I am pro-abortion, not pro-choice, pro-abortion. And so I love seeing abortion on screen when it's depicted accurately and sensitively. And, this is what she wants. This is what she's doing, which I'm like, yes, this is great. But then when I saw that trauma, I was like, oh man, I was like, that's kind of concerning only because there is such a stigma with abortion, and there shouldn't be. And I think that's contextually my issue with it. But yeah,
that makes
I think
sense
you're
too,
right.
though,
I think it is more about her emotional, loss, like what this means, for her, relationship and her life. And perhaps the dreams she had that, you know, she could have stayed in New York and maybe family, like maybe, like, you know, she doesn't ever explicitly state that other than questioning like, oh, what if I stayed? So
yeah. The thing that's interesting about it is, you know, she's so smart that I think, but she's also young and doesn't have a ton of experience, generally in life, I mean. But I think that she kind of intuitively knows that her relationship with Isaiah is not going anywhere, even though maybe she kind of wants it to, because they talk about it briefly when she's like, doesn't she say something like, this doesn't happen all the time?
No, she says that. She's like, do you think
that up?
all the time? It doesn't. Yeah.
She says that.
No, she says.
Yeah. But I think even, you know, I mean, people say that all the time. So, you know, I mean, here's the thing about romance, kids. It does happen all the time. So, you know, maybe bigger and smaller in some relationships, you know, within your own life. But I think that she always knew. She's like, nah, I'm going to Bucknell. And, you know, I wrote him this, you know, now he's got lyrics. Fine. The song's finished. End of story. You can sit next to me on the train platform, but I'm still going to Pennsylvania. So
it's funny that you say it, not funny, haha, but funny, interesting, because thinking about that, because like her poetic lyrics or her poems that she narrates throughout, you know, punctuate parts of the film. And, you know, she's narrating one while she's, you know, having the sonogram and finding out information about the, you know, her pregnancy or what have you. And then while she's waiting on the platform, it talks about a flood and the flood, like the dam breaking and the flood breaking forth. And she says something like, I will remember it all. And there's another part too, earlier in the film, where she talks about like, I will remember our relationship or something like that. And so it kind of has this like kind of prescient feel to it. Like she is as invested as she is, as in love as she is, as much as she is totally into this, there is kind of this sense of part of her knows that this is coming to an end. Like this is finite in a way. But yeah, but I love that. I love this film so much.
Yeah, I'm so glad we all liked it. I think at this point, you probably know which films I'm going to be on board with and which I'm not. So, you know.
Sometimes I'm wrong, though. I usually think I do, but sometimes I'm wrong.
I don't know. I kind of like, it's not like Gene Dealman, in the fact that it's, you know, 3 days in the life of one person doing a thing over and over, but it's hypnotic in that same way. There's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of like toing and froing or whatever, but there's so much information in body language and looks and glances and things that are unspoken and quiet moments that it's just like, you've got to pay attention, and it becomes like, you know, everything is like even small moments become everything. And you're watching this movie going like, nothing's happened in this movie, but you're fucking committed, you know? So
yeah.
That's I dig movies like that.
I do too. I love that. And yeah, what I loved about this is that there's so much to say. Like the film is saying so much explicitly. Like there's conversation between the musicians about Black artists and about protests. And like, you know, one of them talks about hashtag protests and selfies. And they talk about politics and art, you know, the conversation with their friends and Isaiah about, you know, police shootings. And there's so many conversations like that are explicitly happening, and debates about relationships. But then there's also, like you said, there's so much happening that's unspoken. Like thinking about, like, I keep thinking about the violations in this film and the emotional boundaries that are being broken by Isaiah, but also by her mother.
Oh, yes.
Like when her mother worries that she's pregnant because cliche, she wants the pickles, and she tries to lift up her shirt in a really creepy, like invasive way. I'm like, her mother's fucking violating her boundaries too. And this is like, it's just, but again, like her mother doesn't say anything. It's just all with looks. And I just think this was so incredibly well acted, incredibly well written, well shot, well scored. I love that the piano music that's playing throughout the score is his music. And so it's like his music is accompanying her words as she's writing about her life and their relationship. It's beautiful.
And I dug the ending. I love endings that are just like, hey, it's over. You know?
Yeah. I love that too. But I also want to say the song that she writes the lyrics to, that Diamond sings, and it's I realized we're too young to live this old. And I was like, oh, it was like just so sad.
Wise beyond her years.
Yeah. Let's talk about The Surrogate. The film is written and directed by Jeremy Hesh and stars Jasmine Batchelor as Jess. And Jess is a surrogate for her gay best friends, Josh and Aaron. And in the film, after she finds out she's pregnant, she goes in and has some testing done, and they find out that the fetus has Down syndrome. And so the drama of the film centers on whether, as a couple, Josh and Aaron want her to go forward with having this child, and whether she herself wants to go forward with having this child. But specifically, if Josh and Aaron don't want the child, does she, Jess, decide to raise the child on her own? And there's quite a bit of drama from all of those questions and decisions.
Drama with a capital
Yes.
D. And I had sent you guys a text while I was watching this, and I can't remember what I wrote. Something to the effect of gut-wrenching, with punctuation. And what I meant was I felt like I was sitting in on the most intensely private, personal decision that anyone could possibly make. And I just kind of felt like, I don't know if I should be watching this because this is fucking serious. So, it's like these people are having some real fucking decisions they got to make. So, yeah, that's what I meant when I was just like, oh my God, this movie.
I hear you. The movie asks a lot of tough questions of its characters and of us as the viewer, as we're kind of watching them all kind of stumble through all of this.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of precedent for this in movie making, this particular story. So
yeah.
Yikes. Megan, what did you think? Because you've
as
been
far as
quietish
precedent,
over there.
I definitely think, from what I know, it breaks new ground in that way. It did remind me, not in its filmmaking, but just tackling the topic of surrogates. It reminded me of Private Life, Tamara Jenkins's great film with Kathryn Hahn and Paul Giamatti, which I loved. So I had a lot of problems with this film, and I hate to say it because I know it's super small. It's very, very indie, very low budget. Earlier, we were talking about when we talked about Cane River, talking about Patreon, how sometimes technical flaws, or, if it's not the best sound quality or not the best, editing, you love the film anyway because the, visuals are so great, or the story is so compelling, or the characters are so engaging. And for me, every single technical flaw was just amplified here. And it was because and it completely took me out of the story. And I thought it was a very thought-provoking topic and a very controversial one. People have very strong opinions on either side. I do appreciate that the film doesn't demonize anyone, and it really explores this moral quandary, but I just didn't care. I did not really care about the characters. Jess, I probably cared about the most because I think Jasmine Batchelor did a good job acting wise. But other than that, I was like, but what do we know about her? And why do I care about these people? And I just other than the quandary is so awful and horrible and such a tough decision, I just wasn't engaged, and I didn't really feel anything. And you guys know I cry at the drop of a hat, and did not feel anything and did not cry. So yeah, for me, it's interesting hearing you guys talk about it felt very, intimate or personal, or should you be there? For me, this film felt very clinical. It was trying to tick every single box on a list, go down the line and cover things. And that's great. But I wish it had felt, for me, more integrated rather than, okay, now we're going to talk about this. Okay, now we have to make sure to talk about this. Okay, now we have to make sure we talk about this because we want to be, inclusive, which I love inclusivity, of course, but I don't want a story to feel like it's going down a checklist. I want it to feel integrated and authentic, and it just didn't work for me.
Interesting.
I remember I read the the tagline that the press person sent us, and it was like, Jess is thrilled to be the surrogate for her best friend and his husband, blah, blah, blah. when a prenatal test comes back, it creates a moral dilemma that threatens their friendship. What I thought was that it was actually going to be her boyfriend's kid. That's what I thought. And then they're like, oh, the baby has Down syndrome. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So, I wasn't expecting that.
Nope.
I think that, it worked for me story-wise. I disagree with you, Megan, on the performance angle. I thought the best performance was actually she's the Leon's mother. I can't remember her character's name, but Leon is a like a toddler with Down syndrome in the movie, and Jess sort of befriends her mother, but it's more like she's wants to just ask her a bunch of questions about what it's like to have a child with Down syndrome. Anyway, Brooke Bloom is the actor's name, and she is. I've seen her in a million things. She's really great in that part. And I don't know. I particularly, of all the ways this movie could have gone, and I'd be interested to see what you guys thought. The ending, I wouldn't say it surprised me, but at the same time, I was like, oh, they kind of went there. In the sense that, like, she's decided that she would rather terminate this pregnancy than have any sort of relationship with Aaron and Josh. And I was like, huh.
Yeah, that's kind of a shocking decision.
Yeah, I feel like that this, No, I wasn't expecting the story to go that way either. And I think there was an element of it that she doesn't want to have a relationship with them. But I also think she just realized for a multitude of reasons that it's not going to work for her on many levels. Yeah, it's not a right time for her to have a child. It's not the right time, and she's not in a good place career wise, financially. She doesn't really seem to have the support she would need, regardless of whether this child would be a child with special needs or not. It seemed like all of these things were influenced, but it seemed like it all came together. And I think part of what's so tough for, I would say, the last part of the film is I think Jess knows that this is not realistic for her to have this child. And I think that's what makes it so hard for her, is that she's like angry, and she wants to be able to do this. And the fact that everyone is telling her no, and everything's kind of coming together in a way that's just not going to make it happen. I think that kind of fuels some of her anger about everything.
Yeah, I just think that it's interesting that whether it's the actual final nail in the proverbial coffin, that sounds terrible, or whether she's just using it as an excuse when Aaron says to her, or Josh, I can't remember which one of them says this, we're always going to be in your life because we're connected by this child. And then she's, made the final decision. I was just like, woo, oh boy. That being said, I think you're right, Evan, that it was more like she had to talk herself into not being able to do it, But anyway, I don't know. I didn't have the problems with this on a storytelling level.
No, I don't think I didn't have any issues with the storytelling. I think
that's okay. I'll stand alone. I don't care.
Yeah, I think Jasmine Batchelor was good in this role, and I feel like I got to know a lot about her character in terms of how she, like, when they first find out about the test, I find it fascinating that she, as a character, spends all of her time comforting her friends about it, and is such a bigger person that she herself is more interested in comforting her friends, even though arguably this affects her more. And even when they initially ask her or say, like, I think we want to have an abortion and we don't want to have this child, she has a very mature reaction to it. Like, she is like, okay. And although she changes her mind about it later, I think we learn a lot about who she is and how she's willing to go to bat for other people, almost to the detriment of herself at times. And I think watching her change over the course of the movie is seeing her kind of grow into this role where she is taking more responsibility for herself and her direction in life and where she wants to go, and realizing that yeah, she's not happy at work. She has a decent job and she works for a company that on paper sounds great, but it's not really doing the things that she wants. And so that's where I feel like it's interesting that she is starting to lean more toward wanting to have the child and wanting to be a mother and to maybe take a path that she wasn't expecting. But for her, it's a path that she wants. And so she feels in charge of her destiny. And I think that's also another kind of factor in why she goes all in on it, is especially with everyone else telling her, no, you can't do it. It's, she wants to prove to herself and to other people that she can, and she doesn't have to listen to what other people are telling her.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's interesting because it's not quite what I meant when I said, what do we know about her? What I mean is that I feel like she's kind of personalityless. Like, yes, sure, she's comforting people, but for me, and Evan, I think you're making fantastic points, and I kind of wish I saw the film you did, because that sounds like a great film.
Yeah.
But when I'm watching it, I literally felt like I felt kind of like it was just going down the script, kind of like, okay, I'm supposed to be doing this. Okay, now I'm supposed to be doing this. And I just didn't get a sense of who she was as a person. And it just, aside from, oh, she's comforting these people. Oh, she doesn't like her job. Oh, now she's trying to figure things out. Like, yes, of course, we do know those things about her, but I didn't really get, even in small moments, like, who is she as a person? Like, what does she like to do in her spare time? And I have to say, this is such a pet peeve of mine. I cannot stand it when we have a woman protagonist and she has absolutely zero female friends. Like, what the fuck? I'm sorry. There's no way in hell she wouldn't have at least one female friend. Like, that's just crazy to me. And
I'm gonna break in here real quick. I don't think she has any friends.
Right. That's what's weird. It's so weird, and it bothered me.
I'm willing to forgive that, if only because super small budge, and smaller your budget, the smaller your story, and
of course
smaller in scale, not in ideas. And I think that may have just been a function of, trying to get a movie made. I've been thinking about like budgets a lot, in case you can't tell.
But there are I agree with you, but there are creative ways around it. Like, she could have talked on the phone to someone who's like her friend across the country who's like in grad school or something. Like, there is a way to work around it. And it just, and I don't know, and maybe that's kind of the point, the fact that she focuses on everyone else rather than dealing with her own issues in her life. Maybe that is the point, and I will fully, concede to that and acknowledge that. But it just, I don't know. It just, for me, I just kept seeing the things that I wish had been different rather than what was actually happening. But I also want to talk about the fact of, there's a couple of things. I want to talk about the eugenics conversation that keeps coming up. And I also want to talk about Josh and Aaron's conversation where they talk about how they're gay men, so they're allowed to have something normal and want something normal. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts on those two facets of the film.
I think that related to having a child with special needs, I haven't heard that conversation, but I have definitely heard the conversation with all different kinds of people who feel the way Josh and Aaron do, that, yes, I do want something normal because X, Y, and Z have been so hard for me. So not necessarily talking about, a child with special needs, but just I've definitely heard people say that,
But it's not a conversation I hear very often in film. And I think that also speaks to the fact that there are not enough queer stories, not enough queer characters, filmmakers, you name it. But I found it really interesting, and particularly in regards to having a child in this conversation. I thought it was really an interesting and compelling point issue to raise and to discuss.
I agree. And it's such a dicey issue. I feel like the fact that we even have access to the kind of testing that tells us something like this in advance in itself sometimes is such a complicated issue, because like on the one hand, you go look at it and say, well, if we have access and we're meant to know, should we have the right to choose? But there are plenty of people who forego it I mean, a friend of ours, they had a child and they didn't do any of the testing, and they wanted to get what they wanted the child that they got. It's like, I can't tell anybody what's the right thing, but my God, this is a fucking nightmare scenario to think about of like, what do you do in this situation? And I mean, even in that same argument, Megan, Josh evokes the Holocaust, when
whoa. He does? I missed that.
He says, my family dealt with eugenics.
Oh, that's right. He does.
Yeah.
You're right.
That's another issue unto itself. It's like, oh my God, there's so many layers to this. Like, I don't, I don't come down any particular way. It's just, my God, this is just, I don't know how you deal with it. But I think one thing that's important to note, and Shauna brought this up when we were watching is that technically this story, like this whole conflict, is kind of moot in real life, because if they had their lawyers involved and although they did not have a contract, she said to me that if lawyers are involved in this situation, they like vet the shit out of this situation and they have these conversations beforehand. Like, if you get a test and the baby has Down syndrome, what will you do? Like, they have those conversations.
Oh, that's in writing already. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, they have to already have that in writing. So that for her was like, well, the whole story to me is moot, because in real life, this would not have happened. We wouldn't have gotten to this point where we like, it'd be one thing if they changed their mind. Like, that's definitely something that could happen. And that would require a line of dialogue. Well, you said you were okay with this before, but now you're telling me you're not. But so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting about that? That makes it even more compelling to me, because they clearly did, like, clearly Jeremy Hirsch did his research, or clearly somebody was doing their research, because in the credits, if you look at who's thanked, and there are like a million people who are thanked, a ton of amazing filmmakers are thanked in the credits. But one of the names stood out to me very distinctly because it was Raina Rapp. And Raina Rapp is an anthropologist in New York City. I believe she's at NYU. And I read Raina Rapp's textbook in college when I was an anthropology major, and she wrote this book called Testing Women, Testing the Fetus, all about amniocentesis and all about how it's affected by class and race, and how, who does the test and who doesn't, and, and kind of the ethics about that. And the work she's kind of moved into is reproduction, but also disability. And she talks about eugenics and the parallel of eugenics within reproduction and disability issues. So clearly there was research done on that end, but it's interesting, which I find fascinating. But I also think it's interesting that they wouldn't have done maybe some legal research to have like a scene, like, talking about their legal contract
or
and all of that.
Maybe they did, and they decided, you know what? Most people aren't like Shauna.
And they're not going to know.
I mean, that could be. I mean, I have this long running joke with my uncle when something doesn't make sense in a movie. Like, why did they make that decision? Because it's in the script, So.
But it is interesting because I'm not a lawyer by any means, but there was something about it that rang very false to me. I'm like, this is a major life decision. Wouldn't they have contracts drawn up? Wouldn't they have talked to lawyers? Like, there was something that felt very false to me about it too. And that also took me out of the film. So
I disagree with you on that. Although I do agree with Evan and Shauna in that it does seem a little strange that there wouldn't be a little more legalese wrapped up in all this. But
that's what I
What's
said.
that?
I was like, I just said that
exactly.
too.
No, I agree with you. What I'm thinking though is, and maybe I'm giving them too much credit, Jeremy Hirsch too much credit, is that Jess is kind of portrayed as a kind of a quick, like, snap decision maker. Maybe, she just, they're like, yeah, we'll have a gentleman's agreement. Yeah, okay, fine. I'll have your kid, sure. It's kind of like I felt like a lot of the decisions she made came out of nowhere in the movie, and I'm sort of willing to go along with the idea that she's just kind of impulsive like that.
That's fair.
So
that's fair.
That being said, I have another quibble though. I did not think that the performance by our lead was as good as you did. So
as good as I did.
Yeah. I think that was it you, Evan, who thought that Jasmine Batchelor was really good, or was that you, Megan? I can't remember.
I thought she was good.
Okay. I thought she was
okay.
all right. I mean, I think part of the problem with her performance is not so much her as it is with boy, I'm starting to come around to Megan's side a little bit here. The idea that some of this stuff is just kind of like something it doesn't seem like the whole idea of, all right, so I'm going to have a child maybe with special needs, but I'm also now going to run into this restaurant where I have been before as a patron and bitch at them because they don't have an access ramp. That seemed to be really strange, to me. She's never thought about this before. Now she's thinking about it all the time. And so her first inclination that we see anyway is to go into this restaurant and be like, hey, what if someone in a wheelchair needs to come into your restaurant? And that just struck me as really false, for example. And I think that her performance in that scene isn't so great, but I think it's also not something that a normal person would do. So normal in air quotes. So
yeah, I can see that.
I felt like there were a lot of things like that. Like I liked the questions this movie was asking, but I feel like the way it asked some of them was kind of like, not like shortcuts or cheating or anything, but it's just like, Jess goes all in on Brooke Bloom's character, the name of which I can't remember, Leon's mom.
I think Bridget.
Thank you. She goes all in with Bridget, and I feel like Bridget was moments from saying at any second, I'm so fucking exhausted. Can't you tell how hard this is? Jesus Christ. But and I feel like somebody who's as smart as Jess and is empathetic would maybe have picked up on that before Aaron says to her, no, she doesn't seem like she's happy at all, so I don't know. But I also thought it was an interesting character choice that Jess is kind of bad at her job on purpose. Like she's clearly like more qualified than what she's doing, and it kind of bums her out, and so she's shitty at her job. I thought that was a really interesting and good choice because man, I know that person. So I've
have you been that person?
Yeah.
See, I just got the sense that she's just been preoccupied, and that's why she was doing a shitty job.
Well, I mean, yes and no. At the beginning, she's pitching that big, I can't even remember what it was, but she was pitching something that was clearly outside the frame of her job description, which her boss tells her. And she's like, by the way, a couple scenes later, did you send out that invite? And it's like, what? Invite? So she's pitching this fucking huge thing, but now she's got to do the invite? Oh, man. It just overqualification central. So I felt bad for her. By the way, it's so awful to be at a job that you hate.
It is.
Yep. Been there.
Yeah. I think we all have.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, lots of questions, some good questions, but I do kind of coming around to Megan's point. I think some of it just didn't work so well for me, although it held my interest the whole time, mostly because I was so squeamish. Of course it held my interest.
Yeah, for sure.
I was going to say, I definitely, I mean, I agree with you, Dave. And I think that it definitely raises a lot of great questions. And like, there are even little moments like when another couple comes into the restaurant that they're at and says, oh, what are you having? And then the other one's like, don't say that. It's weird. We assign gender. And, there are little moments, and like I said, which are great. And I love that they're raising these questions. And I love that there's a conversation about abortion between Jess and her mom. And her mom is talking about how great abortion is. And Jess is like, I know, I had one. Like, it's a very frank conversation. I love that. I love those kinds of topics that, we're talking about. I just wish it had felt more authentic, lived in, more organic in kind of the way it unfolded. But the issues it's raising, fascinating. And bravo for going there. Like, there are so few films that do explore this topic. or even come close.
Yeah. Kudos for taking some risks.
Oh, definitely.
Well, seems like a good time then to move on to our last movie that we plan to cover today, which is The King of Staten Island. This is directed by Judd Apatow, and it's written by Apatow, Pete Davidson, and Dave Sirus, and stars Pete Davidson in a very autobiographical comedy.
Yes.
About basically Pete Davidson playing himself. Like it's similar in that he plays a 20-something guy who lives with his mom, Marissa Tomei, and he's just a fucking mess. Like he's just smoking weed all the time. He doesn't really have any job. His aspiration is to own a tattoo restaurant where people get tattooed.
I mean, that's kind of
which
that's funny as comedy goes. I mean,
yes, yeah, it's hilarious idea that he is such a stupid thing that he wants to do, and I love how often people tell him that it's a terrible idea. Except I do feel bad in the scene where he's in the car and he hears his mom and Bill Burr, who becomes her boyfriend in the movie, kind of talking shit about him. But getting back to the plot just briefly. So yeah, it's about him growing up and figuring out what the hell he wants to do with his life. But it's autobiographical in the sense that he plays the son of a fireman. In real life, his dad was a firefighter and he died in 9/11. But in this film, his father's character died, I think, in a hotel fire or something.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that vein of biographical kind of truth going on there. So what did you guys think?
What's that Rolling Stones song from Steel Wheels? Mixed emotions. I have mixed emotions about the King of Staten Island.
Fair.
Yeah. Megan, do you want to go first? Why don't you go first?
Yeah. I have to say, this should probably sum up how I feel. So, Evan, as you're talking about the film and as you're describing it and as you're talking about his tattoo restaurant idea, I laughed heartily. Did not when I was watching it. And that pretty much sums it up for me. I barely laughed through this. I didn't really care what was happening for most of it. I felt it was overlong. I will say there were really fantastic moments, like moments that I was like, yes, this is where it's going. This is going to be great. And then it lost the thread. And like the opening, I think is fantastic when Pete Davidson is in the car.
The suicide attempt?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that. Like when
Me
he's closing
too.
his eyes. Yeah, I thought that was fantastic. And I loved his conversations with Belle Powley, but really because I love her so much. She's so great.
Yeah, she was really good.
She is. She's so good in this as this character in this role. I really felt it was believable. I bought into it. I was like, I want to know everything about her. Let's just follow her. She's great. So I loved their scenes and they were surprisingly tender. And, when, he can't have an orgasm and she's talking about, is it, he's talking about the antidepressants and, that was really relatable and really, kind of bittersweet. And so those moments were really wonderful. I just wish the film had, highlighted more of those types of moments rather than drawing out everything and really drawing out this weird rivalry with Bill Burr. And it kind of lost me. And yeah. So there were great moments that were emotional and heartfelt, but for me, there were not enough of them and it just drawn out too much.
Yes, I agree with all of that.
Yay!
The first thing I did when I got the link for this and I opened it up and I saw 2 hours and 16 minutes, I was like, oh, come on. How is a movie starring Pete Davidson, no matter what the subject matter is, 2 hours and 16 minutes long? And I like Pete Davidson, but I don't think of him as the kind of guy I want to watch for 2 hours and 16 minutes. Now, that being said, never having seen him in a leading role before, I thought, I can't believe he's carrying this movie the way he is. I thought he was really compelling and totally believable, especially in the dramatic moments.
Yes.
Of which there are many, as it turns out. But like you, I thought it was overlong. The whole thing with Bill Burr just kind of pissed me off because I'm like, he was his character was such a douche, and I thought that the shaved head and mustache thing was just easy and stupid. Because that's not what Bill Burr looks like. For another thing, it's clearly like, this is we got to have a mustache joke later. I like the relationship with the girlfriend, but there was just so much of it that was just like extraneous. Like you could have lost any one of a number of subplots. Like he could have never had, he never worked at the restaurant. There's you've saved 20 minutes there, or he doesn't have those, the robbery with his friends and they all go to prison.
Robbery.
Oh my God.
Stupid.
The scene was insane.
I know. And I kind of can't believe that it sort of ended up working, but at the same time, it's kind of like, I don't give a shit about any of these fucking assholes. Who cares? And just the overall, like, do I need to see another movie about a white guy who doesn't have any direction in life made by Judd Apatow? Not
Thank
really.
You.
I mean, I feel like Judd Apatow is his own worst enemy. He's like got a lot of good ideas, and he ends up pissing all over like a third or a half of them because he just does the same fucking thing over and over and over.
All right. So I definitely like this more than you guys. I
knew you would. I knew this was going to be an Evan movie.
Yeah. So I completely agree that it is way too long. I also think it takes way too long to get to where it's going, which is the arc of Pete Davidson's character growing up and finding himself. It just takes way too long to get to that point. There's just so much, like you guys said, that's extraneous. For me, I love comedians. I love movies that feature comedians, and especially this one. I think for me, Pete Davidson is really great, and I do think he carries the film. I think a lot of it probably has to do that it's very personal material to him. It's, he lost his father. He has mental illness that he's dealing with, and although he doesn't explicitly state I am bipolar in the film, as he is in real life, he does allude to it. He says I'm weird or I'm messed up, which is why he kind of pushes people away, especially Kelsey. And so yeah, I liked Pete Davidson. I thought he was funny. There were a few times where I had very strong laughs. I think one of those moments was when he was at the ballpark with Bill Burr and his fireman friends, and I think Steve Buscemi turns around and asks him if he wants a hot dog, and he says, "No, I can't have it. I have Crohn's disease." And then Steve Buscemi proceeds to ask him what Crohn's disease is. He tells him. Steve Buscemi's grossed out, and he's like, "You didn't need to tell me all that." And he's like, "Well, sorry, I was just trying to raise awareness." And something about the way you deliver that line, just I cracked up.
Yeah. Also, though, Steve Buscemi fucking asked. That's what, like, I remember that scene being like, "Oh, I didn't need to know that." It was like, you fucking asked, asshole. Fuck you.
So I mean, I like the parts where he goes and his mom kicks him out, and he goes to live at the fire station, and he gets to know all these guys. And that also is in his stand-up. He's talked about getting to hang out with his dad's old buddies and hearing all these insane stories about when his dad was doing all kinds of drugs and all kinds of nefarious activities. And you get to see that in the film when he's out for drinks and hearing stories about his dad doing coke and climbing on a moving car and just all kinds of. So I see the enthusiasm. I feel it. I like it, but I agree with you guys that it's way too long. It takes too long to get where it's going, and there are some elements that just don't quite work as well. Like, I think the stuff with the sister also doesn't quite
I forgot about her.
No, it doesn't
like
work.
The whole
at all.
plot where he goes to the college party and all that. To me, I don't know that I needed any of that really.
No, none of it. Get rid of it. This film needed a ruthless and relentless editor. That's what it needed.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I would argue a lot of films with comedians need a ruthless editor.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing I was upset about.
Oh.
That had to have been cut is when he goes to drop the kids off at the classroom, or he drops the girl at her classroom. Gary Goldman is there putting away paints.
What?
And we don't get to see the interaction between Pete Davidson and Gary Goldman.
Man.
And I'm just so disappointed that was cut from the film, because I really wanted to see Gary Goldman in this movie.
That is a disappointment.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about something I liked since we're talking about do we remember anything. I liked Pamela Adlon in this. There we go.
Yeah.
I liked her.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's great.
Forgot she was in it too.
She's really good in it.
Yeah. She's always good though. You know?
I haven't seen her in a lot, but yeah, everything I've seen her in, I've liked her in. I just want to go back to one thing that you said, Evan, about how you think that, or you were saying that there were hints that he had bipolar disorder. And I didn't get that at all. And I'm certainly no expert, but I have a lot of people in my life who have bipolar disorder, and I didn't get any clue, indication, anything, just beyond the fact that he had ADHD and depression. So I think that's interesting. And if he does, you said that Pete Davidson has it in real life, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
I was going to say, if that's the case, I would have loved to have had that more explored in the film, or, kind of talked about, or, even if he didn't talk about it explicitly as saying like, I have bipolar disorder, like just kind of talking about, the symptoms and dealing with meds. And anyway, yeah, I would have liked that, but that's a different film altogether, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a film that gets back to that first scene where he is driving on the highway with his eyes closed, which never comes back around.
That's the film I want, and I think that's my big problem with the film is that they're like, those great moments are so great that they show glimpses of what this film could have been, and for me, and I would argue should have been, but then it loses its way, and then it ends up just being, kind of for me a run of the mill comedy. And that's unfortunate, because I think the best comedies are the ones that mine the darkest depths. And I really wish it had gone there. And I really wish it had gone darker and deeper. And it could have been still so funny. And yeah. But instead we had to have a bad tattoo back joke.
Oh,
which I'm like,
right.
Which I'm like, really? Like, to me, it was such a cliche that Bill Burr is like, no, I hate tattoos. They're gross. I hate them. I hate them. I hate them. I'm like, oh, he's going to fucking have him tattoo him by the end of the film. And oh, what do you know? It happens. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I'm like, subvert my expectations.
Yeah.
But, oh, well. But yeah.
Yeah.
But it is very clear that this is a very personal story. And I think it's one, and it's funny. I always think about whenever there's a white dude on screen, I'm like, do we need another story? And I know, Dave, this goes back to what you said. Do we need another story about, a white dude who's a slacker trying to find himself or doesn't know what he wants? And, I would say normally no. But with this case, because this is such a personal story about his father and losing his father, who is such a hero. Yeah, that is a story that definitely should be told. I just kind of wish there had been more exploration of that and those issues, and less about Bill Burr.
Yeah. Although he was good in the part, but it's just like, I thought his character.
Oh, see, I don't think so at all. I actually don't think he's good. I think he plays the same character all the time. And so for me, he was not.
I've never seen Bill Burr act. I've only seen his stand-up, which I do not enjoy. So
that's so funny. I've only ever seen him act, never seen his stand-up.
All right. So let's wrap this up.
But Evan, I'm really glad that you liked this film so much. I really am. I'm always glad when people like films. It makes me happy. So
yeah, the idea is that we do this because we enjoy it, right?
Exactly.
Right. We're not just punishing ourselves all the time with movies that suck.
That would suck. That would be torturous.
Yeah. Okay, so quickly recapping here, we would say see Premature on Hulu.
Yes. Oh my God. Stop what you're doing and watch it right now.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like we're a little bit mixed on The Surrogate. Would we say see it or don't see it?
I would say
still
pass.
Come down and see it.
Yeah, I would say pass.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, okay. I'll split the difference and say, yeah, I think see it, but not enthusiastic. I would say see King of Staten Island, but it sounds like you two are more on the not see fence side of the fence.
Yeah, I
Okay.
really love Belle Powley and I love Pamela Adlon, but I don't think you need to see it, unfortunately. So I'd say pass.
Okay. Fair enough. So thank you, folks, for tuning in to another episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. If you like the show, there's lots of places you can find us, but you can also find us at our website, which is spoilerpiece.com. You can rate and review us if you go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. And we would very much appreciate if you rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. That'll help more people find the show. And if you want to get in touch with us, there's so many ways you can do that. You can find us on Facebook. We're Spoiler Piece Theater. We are at Spoiler Piece on Twitter and on Instagram. You can also find us on Letterboxd. I believe we're at Spoiler Piece there as well.
We are.
Let's see what else. You can send us an email. Tell us we're wrong. Tell us we're right. Or just say hi. Send that to spoilerpiece@gmail.com. And you can also give us a call.
At 862-21-PEACE.
Call the Spoiler Piece hotline. Leave us a message. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. So if you really love the show, head over to patreon.com/spoilerpiece and sign up to support the show. For as low as $5 a month, you get exclusive audio each week. This week, we talked about Cane River, which is a film that's available in a few different places, but I personally watched it in the Criterion channel and their selection of black films that they're releasing right now. So you can get exclusive audio, you can vote in monthly polls, you can select movies for us to watch. So there's lots of good stuff. So definitely check that out. And I think we want to thank our patrons.
Yes, we do. So we want to give a big, huge thank you to Bob Chipman, Charles Nash, Chris Wilkinson, Daniel Ronsley, Davida Margolin, Deirdre Crimmins, Elisa, Christopher Jensen, Max Covell, Mike, Lord of the Sith. Ooh, I always love that name. Noah Weiskopf, Rory Glynn, Shauna Harris, Shelley M. McCaskill, Shona Glasgow, and Zach Pigeon.
So thank you, folks. We very much appreciate your patronage.
Thank you.
And of course, thank you to our editor, Otto Clammer, who edits the show each week.
Thanks, Otto.
Thank you, Otto.
Thank you.
And my name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living. You can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
I'm Megan Kearns. I'm a contributor for Edge Media, editor of Bitchflix, and a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on Twitter at OpinionessWorld, and you can follow me on Letterboxd and Instagram at TheOpinioness.
And my name is Dave Riedel. Sometimes I write for Salt Lake City Weekly, and I'm also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as Dave Sees Movies.
And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.